Hi everybody, Chris here. Welcome back to the year of your Excel success. This is month 2, and if you're joining us for the first time, what is the year of your Excel success? Well, it's dead simple. There's 3 parts to it: story, system, starter kit. Today we're talking about starter kit, but we're going to give you those 3 things. I'm going to give you a system for tackling Excel problems, a starter kit, and I want you to get your story straight about why you want to get better at Excel. And then 1 year, the year of your Excel success. Can we transform your career in 1 year with the year of your Excel success? We've got videos coming out on YouTube, 6 or 7 recorded videos in month 1. We've got our monthly live session. Yes, this is the year of your Excel success podcast, and we meet every month to talk about your progress, to review the videos, to answer your questions. And this is month 2. So big welcome to everybody watching. If you're listening on podcast, huge welcome to you too. Welcome to Jeffrey, welcome to Jim, welcome to Roger. I can see you guys in the chat. If you're watching live, make sure you put your questions in the chat. So let's go back to the year of your Excel success. So we're talking about 3 main elements here. We're talking about story, system, and starter kit. Now, if you want to know about my story, I recommend going back to month 1, the year of your Excel success podcast, because it's so important to understand what your Excel story is. I don't think anybody actually wants to get better at Excel. And for me, getting better at Excel was much more about proving to myself that I could do maths, proving to myself that I could have an interesting and varied and meaningful career, and just like feeling a bit better about myself, to be honest. That was my Excel story. You can go back to podcast 1 to work that out. So hopefully you've had a bit of time to think about your Excel story. What's your motivation? Don't say to me, I just want to learn VStack. I just want to learn some new formulae. There must be more to it than that. So this is where it starts with your story. Do you want to get a promotion, move your career in a different direction? Do you want to run your team in such a way that they're not always deep in spreadsheets? Do you want to automate things better? What is your story? So we've got to get that straight first. And then we talk about systems. We're going to talk about systems later today, but systems, we're talking about the only 4 things that you do in Excel, which, as we know, you perhaps know from month 1, data management, data analysis, modeling, and automation. We're going to talk about those again today. We've got a video coming out in the next couple of weeks on these. We're going to put a different slant on this because this system always sounds a bit dry. I have problems really getting people to engage with the idea of this system, the only 4 things you do in Excel. So we're explaining it, presenting it in an entirely different manner in this video. I'm going to talk about that a bit later today. So starter kit, we're going to do some more practical stuff today. We're going to get the screen share going. You can download the download files and work along with me. So we've spoke a bit about the mindset, the emotional stuff, the motivation. That is all key, but at some point you've got to open up Excel and you've got to start doing something in Excel. So if you're opening up Excel, what do you want to have in your toolkit at the absolute basic level? This is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about formatting and formulas. Formatting and formulas. I'm going to get the screen recording going in just a second. And we're going to talk about formatting, easy ways to format a spreadsheet. We're going to talk about 10 formulae that I think should be in your starter kit. Now, both of these topics, the formatting and the formulae, we've already covered this month in videos on YouTube. So you can go ahead, look for those videos, and you can download the download files and work along with me, of course. Now, to get to those videos quickly, you can click below this video. You can find the playlist for the year of your Excel success. All of the videos are stacked up there. So the download files I'm going to use, if you want to locate them, you can locate them in those videos. So big welcome to Michelle, just joined us in the chat. Get your questions in the chat. Very happy to deal with them. Right. Let's get into Excel. So if your spreadsheet looked like this, and I'm sure like me, you've dealt with a few spreadsheets that look like this, how are you going to go about fixing it? Do we just jump into all of the options at the top of Excel? We've got an infinite number of color options here, an infinite number of spacing options A column width could be any size we want it to be. The same for row heights. We could have different justification in cells. We've got an infinite number of font types to choose from. So it's all a bit of a mess, really, isn't it? It's a very complex situation. So how can we really cut through the noise, simplify? And what are some simple things that we can do to start to make a spreadsheet look better and to make it look a bit more like this? Now, if you watch the video on YouTube, I get pretty close to this anyway, in 7 or 8 minutes. I think 6 or 7 minutes, the actual exposition element of the video is. And when I'm trying to make a spreadsheet look good, for me, it is easy these days because I've done it so many times. I've come up with little rules that you wouldn't think of when you're beginning, these simplifications that just make it a lot easier. So with that said, what's the first thing you should think about? I think if you have the feeling your spreadsheet is just it's just messy, what should we get started with? Well, the first thing to think about is spacing for me. The first thing to think about is spacing. You can go ahead and put a couple of spacer columns at the beginning of the spreadsheet. Here, I use the keyboard shortcut, so you can right click and go to insert to put a column in. And then do the same with the rows. So I call these spacer columns and spacer rows. And I like how it just draws the eye into the spreadsheet. I'm not a big fan of A1, or rather, I'm not talking about the 90s boy band here. I'm not a big fan of having data in cell A1, of course, because we just need to draw the eye into the spreadsheet, in my opinion. So this, to me, is already looking better. So some spacer rows and spacer columns draw the viewer's eye into the data. Then we're thinking about consistency. So some consistency of spacing here. What I'd recommend you do is select all of your columns and then choose a column width. Now, we said there's an infinite number of options. So what would be a good starter? Column width 10, 15, 20 are good starters, but I recommend you use a base unit, and then multiples of that, and we'll see what I mean in just a second. So let's try 10, and you can see this is looking a bit better already. And I might say, okay, to make this look even better, to use space even better, I might try column width 8. Now we can see we've just lost the dates there. So I'm going to go Control Z, undo that, and we've got column width 10. This is looking decent enough. So what do I mean by this base unit? Well, I recommend you take a number and then use multiples of that number to give a sense of consistency. For example, this fee column, the fee, it's only two digits. It doesn't need much space here. So let's try column width 5 for that fee column. And then if we needed more, then I wouldn't just choose a random number. If our base unit was 5, we might go 5, 10, 15, for example. All of this will allow you to achieve this consistent look. So already looking better in terms of space here. Now I'm going to think about quickly cleaning up the data and cell formats after I've sorted out the row heights. We've sorted out the column widths. Let's go ahead and sort out these row heights. Now, I had a great comment on YouTube, which is the reason why row heights are default 14.4. Does anybody know? Does anybody know live in the chat? Do you know, if you're listening to the podcast, why is the row height by default 14.4 in Excel? Well, if you go to that formatting video, beginner formatting video, the year of your Excel success, someone's left a great explanation as to why Microsoft set it to 14.4, and it's to do with it being, I think it's 1/5 of an inch, something like that. So there is method to the madness. There is a reason it's 14.4. I'd recommend you go for 15. If in doubt, go for 15 here. And just by dealing with spacing, it already feels a lot better to me. This is why I say deal with spacing first. Color, some people will go and start coloring things first. With color, I'd actually recommend you remove all of the colors first. We've got our simple one color scheme coming up in just a second. So don't start with color. I wouldn't start with the contents of the cells or the font. I would always start with spacing. This is the 20% that gets you the 80% of the value. This is the quickest way to feel better about your spreadsheet, in my opinion. Right. So we've got some slight data cleanliness issues here. So I'm just going to quickly clean these up. Control C, Control V here. So let's presume we've got 3 walks on each day. Does that work out? Something like that. Anyway, Control D to autofill down here. So what about individual cell formats? What are the options here? Well, we've got our date format. So make sure if you have dates in a cell that you go ahead and put the date formats on. Now what's happened here, I've just removed the date formats, and you can see we've now got numbers. So why do we have numbers? Because Excel recognizes each day as a number. I think 1900, 1st of January 1900. What happened on the 1st of January 1900? Who knows? Queen Victoria, something like that. 1st of January 1900, I believe, is day 1. And from there, days are allocated a number. Let's see if I can prove this. Let's go to today. So today's the 22nd of February 2026. By clearing the formats, I can get today's day number. And then what if we say this day 46,080. So I'm going to take this back to the date formatting. Then I'm going to say this cell minus 46,080. Is this going to give us the 1st of January 1900? We'll see. I think it does. Has it? I think so. I think it's something like that. Does that make sense? Hang on. Right, I'm going to go on a small detour here. So 100 years will be 36,000. Yeah, it does make about sense. Makes sense, doesn't it? So it's 126 years. So 365 times 126. Yeah, it's not too far away. So yes, 1st of January 1900 seems to be day 1. So according to Excel, this is when history started. And this is why days have a number. Times are managed as proportions of 1. So that's why you'll often see times appearing as decimals in Excel. But we can put the date formatting on and we're going to get our dates back. So dates and times in Excel can be a nightmare. Yes, on the channel we've got our dates and times survival guide. You can find that Target Spreadsheet Solutions on YouTube. You'll be able to find that video. Okay. So this cell we have text, these cells we have text. So with the minutes, what might we want to do here? Well, another principle to follow would be, we could say simplicity, or we want the minimum necessary information to communicate what we're trying to communicate here. So just managed to remove some text there. It's looking much less cluttered. And now we want to think about making the alignment consistent here. So we could align this centrally. You could align this to the left. This kind of number, this kind of whole number, I would tend to align centrally, but alignment. So we're thinking about cell formats, including alignment. Alignment is something else for us to think about. If you're dealing with this a yes or no option, I'd actually recommend getting rid of this altogether and using a newer feature in Excel, which is Excel's checkboxes here. So checkboxes, you can see, also need to be properly aligned. So we could centrally align these, and you can go ahead and you can see at the top in the formula editing bar, Excel recognizes a checkbox as true if it's ticked or false if it's not ticked. So maybe not quite a formatting thing, but a nice way to really clean up the spreadsheet, and that's what formatting is all about. For the fee, let's go ahead and just remove this pound sign here. Excel's kind of done that for me. Okay, let's not worry too much about that. Let's just put 12 in here. You see, I have a pound sign hanging around. That is kind of annoying me, and it's a good example of a quirk of Excel formatting. That pound sign that I typed in manually as a teaching point, I basically can't get rid of it. So I'm going to go for accounting or currency here. Once again, we put the formatting type on and it looks a lot clearer there. The long walk column, I'm not going to worry about for now. So how long have we been going? About 10 minutes on this task, and we're looking good. What do we think in the comments about what we're doing so far? Jeffrey is saying, A1 is a great place to put the password. White text and white background to unlock a locked sheet if you need another master to help maintain a shared workbook. Interesting idea, Jeffrey. I don't know if I could wholeheartedly recommend it for data security purposes, but yeah, a bit of a trick of the trade there from Jeffrey. Okay. So what have we done? We've dealt with spacing, we've dealt with consistent column widths, row heights, we've dealt with alignment in cells, we've dealt with data formats in cells, looking much better. So what's going to take us to the next level now? Yes, excuse me. It's going to be to get some color in. So you're like, Chris, color is so complicated. How do I approach it? You know, these are just some of the colors available in Excel. You can go to more colors here, and it's literally infinite, the amount of colors that you can get. Do we have a color picker in Excel yet? I don't think we do. Microsoft, I'd like to see that, a color picker in Excel. That'd be really good when you're building color schemes. So to simplify this, to get out of, you know, Excel color hell, I would recommend just using one color. Just using one color. I would go even further, and I'd say just use a standard color. Why would you go for a standard color versus a theme color? Well, these theme colors are related to theme. And if somebody is operating a different theme in Excel, those colors might change. Only slightly, but they might change. Whereas standard colors, I believe, give you complete control over what's going on. So choose a color. Could be green, purple, red. I would tend to avoid because it has this kind of connotation of an emergency, and it's often used in conditional formatting to highlight particular cells for a particular reason. Green might be the same. Green has a connotation of something going well, doesn't it? Or something overperforming. Blue maybe less so. So this is why I tend to be drawn to blue. So blue is my one color. This is my one color color scheme. And I'm going to go dark color, light font. Dark color, light font. And you can see Control B and Control I. I've gone for the bold and italic setup there, and you can see the row height is, I imagine it's 30, yes, Alt HOH on the Windows PC. So the row height, once again conforming to this idea of a base unit. Our base unit for the rows is 15, and 2 times 15 is 30, of course, and this gives us the height of our header row. So I recommend for headers dark color, I've gone for blue, with white or light grey letter color. And then the first column, I'd recommend using the same color. Yes, this is a one color color scheme, but using, you know, a lighter variant of that color. And I am going to venture into the theme colors here. And I just really like this setup. Very simple, my one color scheme. Now you could leave this like this. What might be a critique here? For me, readability. Readability is a slight critique. So do you ever get, say, a utility bill, or maybe you're reading a newspaper, or Sky Sports, I find, are quite guilty of this from time to time. They have some data on a screen which is tabulated, as our data is tabulated, but it lacks readability. Now, what does that mean? If I switch off the grid lines here, we've now lost some readability. Because we've lost the grid lines, we've lost the ability to easily trace across the line. Now, it's not too bad with this row height, but if we were to increase the row height quite quickly, this would get quite annoying. You know, understanding, okay, this £12, who does it relate to? That's because we're losing readability. Now, if we lose readability, the user is not going to be able to assimilate the data, is not going to want to engage with your data. So what would my approach be? I would switch off the grid lines. I love this clean look that you get from switching off the grid lines, but I would then go on to add some readability aids in the form of horizontal borders. So what do you think about borders? If we put all borders on here, this is okay, but it's very much a traditional spreadsheet look. I just find it's overkill. I just find you don't need all of those borders. The optimal number of borders for me is just to go for these horizontal borders. So I get into the formatting dialog box, Alt-H-O-E for the Windows shortcut. Something like this for me is pretty good. What we've been working on this 15 minutes or so. I think when I first started my career, in fact, I remember the first spreadsheet I ever worked on. If you watched month 1 of the Year of Your Excel Success podcast, you'll know my spreadsheet story. I lived and worked in Japan for 4 years, and I remember working for this PR company in Tokyo and putting a spreadsheet together to do with costings for a press conference or something, and spending ages trying to get it look good, like hours trying to get it to look good. I wish I'd known these super simple techniques then. So if I were to permit myself here one more color, I would consider doing something like this. I'd put a bright contrast color in. Excuse me. Orange tends to work for this. Once again, standard colors orange. And because we're beneath the header here, I'll go for a thicker row, a thicker line rather. Something like this. We need to go even thicker. I do find these lines quite difficult to understand, and I find if you're working on multiple monitors, they can just be completely different. So something like this I like. Just with the contrast color, the brighter color in there. And this is a key part of your Excel starter kit. Can you look at a spreadsheet and make it look good and do it simply, do it with confidence, work through it in a methodical way, so that it's not just a matter of opinion. I really don't think it's just a matter of opinion. I've had this conversation with a few people over the years. It's not just subjective what good data presentation is. There's certain principles that we've touched on that are objective, really. To what extent have you observed the principle of cleanliness, the principle of spacing, the principle of contrast between colors, white on dark, for example, the principle of readability? We've been referencing those principles. All I do really, as you've seen, is work through those principles. And this is my super easy one color Excel formatting approach. Okay, with that said, how is everybody doing? If you're watching live, big welcome to the Year of Your Excel Success podcast. Let's zoom out for a second for people who are just joining us. What is the Year of Your Excel Success? Well, there's 3 parts to it. There's story, systems, and starter kit. We're talking about starter kit today. Story, I want to know what your story is, but nobody wants to get better at Excel, or nobody just wants to get better at Excel. In my opinion, there's always some kind of higher goal, some kind of deeper motivation, personal, career related. If you really want to make progress in Excel, you've got to work out what your story is. Second, system. We have a system which we're going to talk about later today, which is how to think about data-related problems that are in spreadsheets. How to think about Excel problems. It's a general theory of Excel practice. I've been developing it over the past 10 years in my career. If you have a system which is entirely conceptual, it's a conceptual framework for thinking about Excel problems, this will massively help. So we've got story, systems, and we've got starter kit. And the starter kit we're talking about today, the topic of this live stream is the starter kit. We're going to talk about formatting, going to talk about formulae, and then we're going to get on to some more conceptual stuff we're going to talk about towards the end. So with that said, keep your comments coming in. I will keep an eye on the chat for any interesting comments or questions. With that said, what are some formulae that should be in your starter kit? Well, once again, below this video, you'll see a link to the Year of Your Excel Success podcast playlist, not the podcast playlist, just the normal playlist. All of the 5 to 15 minute tutorials that we release, we're going to be doing between 2 and 6 or 7 each month. You can find on that playlist, and you'll find 2 formula related videos there in month 1. So we've got 2 sets of 5 formulae. We've got 5 beginner and kind of old school traditional formulae, often overlooked, but still doing most of the work in Excel spreadsheets, in my modeling work certainly. and then 5 newer school Excel formulae. So you can go ahead, if you click onto those videos, you can find these resources. I'm going to go through the highlights now. So what are some great old school formulae that I think you need to know? Well, let's see if we can go ahead and find the file. Here we go. Yes. So once again, it's our dog walking business. What if we wanted to analyze this data set? I'm often asked to do this. A friend of mine asked me to do this like last week, a simple data set. What's the best way to do some analysis? You'll be surprised how many professionals are not able to look at a data set and just do very basic analysis. Yes, we've got AI tools, Copilot, things like that. I'm not sure. I think as a professional, you need to be able to understand how to do it and certainly the meaning of this analysis, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to explain it to somebody, to make it meaningful. When you're doing that explanation, well, you've got to be able to understand what's going on. So if we wanted to count the number of walks per dog, you might say, Chris, that's easy. This is only a small data set. Well, it's a small data set for the purposes of demonstration. I use this formula count if all the time. I call it the formula that counts because it counts stuff, but it counts in your toolkit, it counts in your career, because you can do very powerful data analyses just with this formula. So we're using a data set with 3, 6, 9, 12 rows. It works just as well with a data set with 12,000, 120,000 rows. Highly recommended count if. So to get count if working, we have to point Excel to a range. So what's the range of cells that we want to count a value in? What's the range of cells that we're analyzing? We need to go ahead and put those dollar signs in. So I recommend hitting the F4 key there to put the dollar signs in. You can do that manually too. And then the criteria. So the criteria is the cell that contains, you could type this value in too, but the cell that contains what we want to count. So I want to count Frodo's name here. You could type in the name, as I said. It's better to have this piece of information in a cell because that means we're not hard coding information into formulae. That's a principle that we want to avoid. Later this month, we've got a starter kit video coming out. I might talk more about that later, but we're going to talk about this kind of thing. What the overall structure of an Excel file should be and why you shouldn't be putting that information into a formula where it's difficult to change. You should be putting that information on a sheet somewhere in the file where it's easy to change. Okay, so count if is telling me Frodo appears 4 times in this data set. I'm going to go ahead, paste special, Control Alt V and F. And I can see Luna's name appearing 3 times in this data set. I'm going to go ahead and do a sense check, and this seems reasonable to me. So count if, no lie, accounts for probably the majority of my data analysis. The majority of data analysis is simple counting of things, simple counting of what you'll call discrete data. So in this case, we're analyzing text, we're analyzing dogs' names, that counts as discrete data. Most data, the vast majority of data people have to analyze is discrete, and count if, dead simple, powerful is the way to do it. So fees. So I want to find the total fees for each dog in this data set. How to do that? Options. We've got options. Pivot table. Nice option. Do you want to get into pivot tables? How's your blood pressure? Not now. Not on Friday afternoon. The sum would be a nice option. Sum ifs. In fact, sum if singular will work for this. Sum if, once again, classic Excel formula, underrated, does a huge amount. So we go to the range. Once again, we're looking at the range that contains the data. We want to analyze, we want to fix that range because we're going to copy this formula down. The criteria, well, we want to pick out the dog name. So Frodo in this case. So this reference we don't fix because we want this reference to move down with the formula. We want the reference to be relative. And then the sum range. So the column containing the data that we want to sum up. If we wanted to sum up total minutes, we'd click in this cell. We want to sum up total fees. So once again, holding down the shift key, expanding this range, going to hit the F4 key This is how easy it is to do formula-based data analysis. And this is why these classic formulae are still a huge part, will for the rest of my career be a huge part of my toolkit here. Okay, so how might you quickly check this? Alt and plus on the Windows PC is allowing me to sum up this column, and we've got 142. I can then use the shift key and the arrows to select all of the data here. See what's happened there? I've summed up the wrong column. Let's sum up the right column. I can see at the bottom of Excel it says sum 142, so we should always be checking our formulae as we go. A good way to do that is to check if you've got sum if, the total of those sum ifs should equal the total of the data in your data set, of course. Very good. Yeah, good boy here from Jeffrey. So Jeffrey says, before I modify column alignment, as we were just doing a few minutes ago on the Year of Your Excel Success podcast, I like to find numbers entered as text since they are left aligned. Absolutely. Numbers entered as text is definitely something for us to look out for. And the alignment, as you said, Jeffrey, is a clue. Right, percentages. Percentages in Excel, it's actually a little modeling job in Excel, but it's a good way to begin to build confidence doing simple calculations with simple, what I call arithmetic formulae. Arithmetic formulae, plus, minus, divide, multiplication, how to do that. So, percent total fees. We've got our total fees at the bottom here. So how would we figure out percentages? Once again, this is a job that would have really scared me before I had the year of my Excel success. So we're going to go ahead and do a simple division. So 48 over 142, that's going to give us the proportion. And then the proportion, because this cell is already formatted for percentage, is to stay in percentage. But if we change this back to general, we're going to get the proportion there. And it's a nice example of, once again, of relative and absolute references working together. There's no dollar signs on the first reference, which is blue. So this M6 reference, which is blue, is going to move down with the formula. There are dollar signs on our M9 reference, which is this pink color, orange, red. As I said, my colors are terrible. That's why I do one color schemes. And this formula, this reference rather, isn't going to move down. It's absolute. Control-Alt-V-F. And as we go down, we can see our percentages coming down. How could we quickly check that a proportion or a percentage calculation is accurate? Well, we can do that by adding them all up. Alt plus on the Windows PC. What should they add up to? If everything's worked, they should, of course, add up to 1. And we can go ahead and put this percentage formatting on. I've forgotten the shortcut for percentage formatting. I was going to say Control P, but that's print, isn't it? So let's go ahead and find percentage, which is just here. And that's how to do a basic data analysis. And once again, this is why the Year of Your Excel Success is here. It gives you the 20% of work that's going to give you the 80% of the value. Most professionals would struggle to do that kind of data analysis. Very good. So we just got started with a few basic formulae there. Now, if you look in the video description below this podcast, you can see our playlist. There's 2 playlists in there. You can see the Year of Your Excel Success playlist. So if you're enjoying these formulae, there's a couple more, including my secret that I put in there, one of my Excel secret weapons. I've included that too. So you can, if you go through the playlist, you can get to the video, which is 5 Excel formulae to start your journey, I believe it's called, and you can check out the other Excel formulae. But hopefully just that demonstration shows how powerful and how worthwhile really these basic Excel formulae are. There's a lot of hype here on YouTube, and everyone's playing the content game. Everybody's trying to get views. Don't get me wrong, I have a few clickbaity videos out there. There's a lot of hype about new Excel formulae. Do they change everything? Do they change the game? Has Excel practice fundamentally changed? Well, I run a small consultancy with a small team here, Tiger Spreadsheet Solutions. I'm talking to business people every day about how they're using Excel, how their teams are using Excel, how they're managing data, what's taking time, what's taking money, how we can improve efficiency, how we can save that time and money, automate processes. I'm talking to people every day about that stuff. I don't think Excel practice has fundamentally changed. The techniques in Excel, what's available is not going to fundamentally change the way people are storing data in a grid as they've been doing for millennia. So we need to get a bit more fundamental if you really want to make progress with Excel. It's not just about learning formulae, but yes, in your starter kit, formulae do work. We're going to talk more about mindset and fundamentals after we've spoken about some new school formulae. Yes, I recommend at least some new school formulae. I don't recommend formula obsession or, believing the hype that Excel practice is fundamentally changing because of the introduction of any particular formula, including the Copilot formula. By the way, I'm a big fan of Copilot, and I have Copilot open almost all day for my work day. But as I said, the nature of the problems we're dealing with as a business, it hasn't changed a huge amount because of AI. In fact, I think there's more interest in Excel automation techniques because people are having conversations with their AI tool. Anyway, that's a bit of a sidebar. So you're saying to me, Chris, show me some new Excel formulae. Well, I'll get started with a dynamic array. And you're saying, Chris, a dynamic what? A dynamic array. There's that calc error. I haven't ever seen that. Perhaps that's the case. The unique formula, we can go ahead, just point it to a data set, and it's going to pull out the unique values in that data set. How cool is that? This is the unique formula. Now, a couple of things to point out here. The first thing is this is formatted as a table, this data set. Now, the quickest way to manage your data, make it dynamic. So even if the data set expands or even if you delete some rows, the calculations are going to work. The best way is to use a table. I haven't always been a fan of Excel tables. I've changed my tune a bit recently because, well, for various reasons I won't go into. But yes, tables are the easiest way to organize your data. So this is a table reference. Table Jan is the name of table, and dog in the brackets there, parentheses, what are they? Square brackets. Dog in those symbols is the name of the column. So that explains part of it perhaps, but then you're saying, Chris, what's this blue highlighting around this formula? Well, that indicates an important thing, which some people argue is the brand new concept that changes everything in Excel practice. Well, I'm not sure. Well, you tell me. You can download the download file, watch the video, 5 Excel formulae to take you further, and you can tell me what you think. The blue outline means this is a dynamic array. A dynamic array. Now, this one thing I'm going to do now might make everything make sense in terms of dynamic arrays. It's going to show the dynamic quality of the table because the table is going to automatically expand to consume this data. It's going to show the dynamic quality of the unique formula too, because what's going to happen? What's going to happen when I type a value into this cell? We're going to go for Chris. Let's see what happens. Well, we've got an NA error here. Let's not worry about that now. That's not part of the teaching, but you can see the table has automatically expanded. So a nice demonstration of the practicality of tables, and you can see Chris has been added to the bottom of the unique formula there. Pretty cool. So this is a dynamic array. A couple of things to look out for with dynamic arrays. What if we had a value in one of these cells, independent of the unique formula? What would happen? We'd then get a spill error. And spill is saying this dynamic array formula is trying to use this space, but can't do it because there's a value in that cell that won't let it spill down. This is why we get a spill error. And thank you to Alistair who's reminded me, percentage shortcut is Control-Shift-5. Isn't it Shift and P or something? Alt and P? Anyway, thank you, Alistair, for pointing that out. Very good. So let's move on to the filter formula. So unique is, well, it is quite unique. It is a very practical formula. You know, long-suffering Excel developers like me, we used to spend a lot of time trying to extract unique values from data sets. I've done that so many times with football teams for our big customer in the football trading. So the unique formula allows us to do that quickly, and allows us to do that formulaically. Okay, but there's more. So what if I told you can get the power of a filter, in a formula, once again, in a dynamic array formula? You mean we can view filtered data without having to click through those really annoying and onerous filter menus? Yes, we can do that. So we're going to filter our table jam. We're going to include the values in the dog column where the dog equals our dog name here. Is this going to work? I don't use this formula much. Is this going to work? Let's have a look. Okay, yes, we did manage to do that. So how cool is that? We can see the filter data displaying here. And we can go ahead, select one of our other dogs, and we've got the power of a filter in a formula. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. So this is a good way to get started. Yeah, with dynamic arrays, the unique formula I'd recommend for getting started. The filter formula is a great way to continue, and we can go ahead and just encase, that's not quite the right word, but we're just going to wrap the filter formula up in sort. And can we do anything else cool here? Sort index, sort order is what we want. So if we set sort order to 1, the data is going to sort with the latest dates first. And if we set this to 0, the data is going to, no way, sort order. Okay, it's 1 and -1 to do it the other way. There we go. So you can see we've managed to filter the data, we've managed to sort it. And these are pretty cool, these dynamic array formulae. There's lots of cool stuff that we can do, and there's plenty of options to give you within the formula that gives you flexibility. That being one example, being able to control the sort order, top to bottom or bottom to top, just with a number in the cell. So what do you think? Dynamic array formulae, pretty impressive. Do they change the game? Do they change everything? Well, that's something, I have a kind of mental file where I'm putting my notes about that as I go through my career. What do you think? And Jeffrey says one suggestion for formulas is to create and reference named ranges. Absolutely, with descriptive naming, then formulas explain themselves. It's a great idea, Jeffrey. And we have our starter kit video coming out. It should be out next week or the week after, where we're going to talk about structuring a whole Excel file and the importance of using named ranges to allow us to quickly access cells on different sheets. So absolutely, named ranges are definitely part of this story. So, year of your Excel success, zooming out literally and figuratively here. Year of your Excel success, story, systems, starter kit. Spoke about my story last week. What's your story? Have you written it down? Have you reflected on it? Have you put it in the YouTube comments? Thank you to people who have. Absolutely fantastic stuff. So story, system, and starter kit. So starter kit, formatting. You know how to do a one color scheme. You know how to work through a spreadsheet, work through space, consistency of column widths, row heights, single color scheme, cell formatting, alignment, different formatting types. You know how to format a spreadsheet and to make it look good. This is a good part of your starter kit. You now have between 5 and 10 Excel formulae that will get the majority of your Excel work done. So starter kit, formatting formulae, a nice mix of classic formulae and new school formulae. We've spoken about dynamic arrays today. If you want to dig further into either of those topics, the playlist for the year of your Excel success is in the video description below. You can check out those videos, you can download the download files, and we have many other videos on the channel related to those topics too. So you can go for a deep dive on either of those topics. So we want to get out of Excel for the last part of this podcast, and we want to talk about mindset, because we spoke about this a little bit in month 1. I want to talk about a couple of things. But firstly, the mindset. So how should you go about Excel problems, if you like? Well, this is our basic idea. You're only going to do 4 things in Excel. You're only ever going to do 4 things in Excel. Now, I've been banging on about this idea for about 5 years. You know, I had a crazy project about 5 years ago, which was to create a general theory of Excel usage. So when you open up Excel, is there a general methodology, a kind of decision-making methodology that we could present to professionals that they could apply that would steer them towards using the right tools for the right problems? Because the problem with Excel is there's so much stuff in there. There's such an array of tools. It's a bit like if you put me in kind of a builder's yard with loads of materials. In fact, if you put me in B&Q, I find it a bit intimidating. Quite frankly, I feel lost because there's so much stuff in there. It's all stuff that looks cool and powerful, but I'm not a very handy guy. You know, I don't really know what it's for. So for the average professional, you know, opening up Excel is like being me and walking in to B&Q. If you ever see me in B&Q, you can of course remind me of this. There's so much stuff. So much stuff. How can we simplify? And we simplify conceptually. We don't simplify by jumping into Excel and trying to tick off the techniques one by one, trying to tick off the formulae and the icons one by one. We simplify by just thinking about the only 4 things that you do in Excel. And the first one is data management, inputting, importing, cleansing, and transforming data to get the data and data format you need. And we'll talk about the others in a second. So, as I said, I've been banging on about these ideas for a long time. You might have heard me talk about them on the channel, but we've got a new take on these ideas. We've got a video coming out next week, which is, and we're going to get an exclusive here on the Year of Your Excel Success podcast, which is the 4 Excel personalities. The 4 Excel personalities. So what's your Excel personality? Are you primarily engaged with data management? Are you primarily a data analyst? Are you primarily a modeler? Or are you primarily an automator? So these are the only 4 things you're going to do in Excel. You engage with data management, data analysis, modeling, or automation. So this for me is interesting from a practical perspective. Yet when I sit down, when I talk to my customers, or as a professional, you sit down, you're dealing with some kind of problem in your team, in your organization, this is the best way to get started. It's the way to make sure you're not leaning your ladder against the right wall. You're using the right tools for the job. You know, I've met many capable professionals who do things really well in Excel, better than I do, using Power Query better than me, VBA better than me, whatever it might be, but it's not a VBA job. It's not a Power Query job. The ladder's leading against the wrong wall. They're using the wrong tools. So this is a huge gain you could make. Just monumentally, I can't find the words. It's so big, the gain. You know, you've spent too much time down rabbit holes. By applying this framework, you can make sure you waste less time. So from a practical perspective, it's interesting. But from a more personal perspective, it's interesting because each of these 4 personalities, the data manager, the analyst, the modeler, and the automator, there's strengths and weaknesses here. Strengths and weaknesses. And I have to give it to AI. I was talking to Copilot about this video idea, and Copilot said to me, well, you need to talk about the weaknesses. You know, what about your weaknesses as a spreadsheet developer? I was like, well, hey, you're only an AI tool. Hey, I don't want to go deep here. You know, I don't want therapy. But Copilot had a point. Had a really good point, and it's allowed me to really flesh out and animate and make interesting this conceptual framework that nobody really buys into. Videos about this never do very well. So if you are primarily engaged with data management, you know, you're bringing files together, collating files, putting data into another file and emailing it off every day. That kind of job I call data management. Now that's a great skill to have. Yeah, the data manager is probably the most important Excel personality, because if the data isn't managed properly, it's not in the right place, you can't do the modeling, you can't do the analysis, you can't do the automation. But it's not just about data management. And this is the thing, we all have our own partial and biased view of what Excel is, as I do. And understanding what the 4 personalities are allows you to firstly become aware of that. I didn't like that when Copilot said, no, you've got weaknesses to your Excel practice. I absolutely have. Allows you to be aware what your personality is, what the other personalities are, and what you might learn from the other personalities. Because if you're a data manager, you're only involved with bringing data together, those data management jobs. You probably haven't fully explored the brilliance of the data analysis tools in Excel. Even the formulae we just covered today, things like COUNTIF. I've met many professionals who've never heard of COUNTIF, but they have very strong skills in other areas of Excel practice. It might be you're a great automator, and this is what Copilot looked me in the eye and said, this is you. You're great at automating Excel, using VBA, using Power Automate, literally saving companies millions of dollars in saved time because the processes are automated. They're spending less time moving things around spreadsheets. They're spending less time fixing errors that come from humans doing that. Now, automation is amazing. My company really is built on Excel automation, but there's stuff I miss. Excel formulae, I think, is definitely a weakness for me. I could go to the modeler, one of the other Excel personalities, and definitely learn some things. Learn some things about new dynamic array formulae. Learn some things about building complex chains of logic. You saw me build these formulae today. I'm not very fluent, really. Not compared to, the real top guys building formulae. So this is what I'm going to invite you to do. I'm going to invite you to acquaint yourself with this framework. But then if you really want to go deep on the year of your Excel success, why not? Check out the video we've got coming out and try to think, okay, which one is my Excel personality? And from there, what might I learn from these other Excel personalities, and what are the quick wins that I could get by, learning some other techniques, learning some automation techniques, some modeling techniques, or even some data management techniques. And then long term, how can I really skill up in these areas? I mean, get permanently engaged in this process of skilling up, keeping my Excel practice up to date. I've learned OfficeScript in the past couple of years, Power Automate I've learned in the past couple of years. So if you really want to make an impact, make this year the year of your Excel success. It is a little bit about that self-awareness, and then about acknowledging what your weaknesses are. Doing YouTube videos is a great way to do that, because people will certainly tell you in the comments. And then being able to build from there. So this is the year of your Excel success, month 2, and we have spoken about story, system, starter kit. Month 2 is about your starter kit. We've spoken about formatting, formulae, and a little bit more conceptually, a little bit more about this only 4 things you do in Excel mindset and the 4 Excel personalities. I would love to hear how you are getting on with the year of your Excel success. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you leave me a comment. If you listen on podcast, thank you so much for listening. This month, as usual, we've got recorded videos coming out. We've got posts on YouTube, and we will be back next month for month 3 of the Year of Your Excel Success podcast. I'll see you then.